this is just a continuation of that day that I got sick. But I have, I'm just.
All our little
think it's
piggy
probably
here.
October's booked. When I hit live.
So it doesn't give up.
Sometimes it's a minute before we go live.
Go somewhere.
So
Right now.
You can't see them, right?
Oh, she's zooming.
I don't know.
There
Oh,
she
she's
is.
home.
Is she in?
Yep.
I'm here.
Is Jim still in Germany?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then we, oh, John. Whoops.
Everyone, I want to apologize for not making the public works meeting.
I couldn't either.
No, I'm on.
I hit pause.
I apologize. I completely got the ball.
It's a lot of meetings.
So I want to
Just go back and check. Where we are now and look at it tomorrow. All right, so Janine's in Zoom, so we have a quorum. So we're all set.
Go ahead.
Well, the City of Kewaunee Common Council meeting for Monday, September 12th to order. Let the record show Blaha's excused, Zimmerman's on Zoom, and Brewster is excused. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a brief meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. All right, item 3, approval of the August 8th, 2022 Common Council minutes and August 22nd, 2022 Special Common Council minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I would second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Item 4, public comment, communications. If anyone would like to speak under public comment, please step up to the podium, state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes if you'd like to address the council. Does anyone wish to speak under public comment? Anyone wish to speak under public comment? Public comment is then closed. Item 5, boards, commissions, committee and staff reports, public works committee agendas, minutes, finance committee agenda minutes, personnel committee agendas minutes, lighthouse preservation committee agenda minutes, newsletter, engineers report, and staff reports.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Mayor's report. I'd like to read some correspondence from Mickey Valona. Hi, my husband and I stayed at the Kewaunee Marina for a few days last week. I just wanted to let you know how wonderful Augie and Greg were. They were so friendly and helpful during our stay. Augie even came back after hours our first night to help us check in and find a slip since we didn't arrive till almost 5 p.m. Because of them, we will definitely stay in your marina again. Thanks for having such fabulous employees, Mickey Valona and Jim Eisenman. Well done, guys. All else I have is I just wanted to put a few words around Cedar Corporation being here tonight. I spoke with Jim quite length many times. There's a lot of things going on. And some of the items on here, he's just giving a brief, well, maybe brief, we'll see how brief, but going to be giving some presentations on some of the things like the marina and the charrettes and that sort of thing. I really wanted the council to kind of hear it all together. Some of you have been a part of some of these things individually and not collectively. We're not going to be taking any action. Some of those items then are going to be referred back to the Public Property Committee. So again, I appreciate him for bringing his people here and giving us a rundown on some of those exciting projects. So that's all I have under Mayor's report. Item 7, unfinished business. Authorize certain officials to sign an agreement for services with Davis and Keelthau to be city attorney.
Make a motion that we sign the agreement.
Do we need to know, Heath, who would be the authorizing individual being recommended by the council?
Well, the current version is yours.
Okay,
Your signature with Joanne as the attest. I think Alder Shelton wanted to have a couple clarifications added. And we've already, by the way, this is Tony Stefik. He's our primary contact with David Kewaunee as it relates to this agreement. There's a couple of things that Tony can clarify on that as it relates to comments, questions from Alder Shelton.
Absolutely. So
so just for a matter of order, we did have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
So I guess, could I have a second on that?
Second.
Nelson? All right, I'm sorry, go ahead. Discussion?
discussion time. All right. So first of all, thank you so much for deciding to retain me and my firm as your city attorney. We're really excited to serve. We've already begun serving. We've tackled a couple of interesting issues already. But we are very, very excited to be helping out the city. We take great pride in our Green Bay office of our municipal team. We have a long history of serving cities, villages, school districts, and other municipalities, and it's really been our historic bread and butter. And glad to continue that with you all. So look forward to helping you out in whatever way I can. We've had a couple of questions about our retainer agreement. So just to clarify, and I'm absolutely fine with whoever ends up signing the document to make the changes that I'm about to explain and initial them, and they will be completely fine on our end. The first is I've agreed to keep my rate at $265, which is down from my normal public sector rate through August 31st, because that was the first year. Explain a little bit about our firm. Our fiscal year right now ends on September 30th. And so usually October 1st is when any rate changes go into effect. I can tell you that my rate won't change from September 1st to September 30th of next year, because I don't want to deal with the paperwork. So that'll stay the same. I anticipate our firm changing our fiscal year to a normal calendar year. So we'll tackle Q4 of 2023 when the time comes, but 265 will stay. We reserve the right in our retainer letter to charge 12% per year interest. I can tell you I've never had to charge it to a municipal client, and I've only had to charge it to private sector clients that totally stiff us with a big bill that we have to go collect on. But what we'll do in the letter is to clarify that it's 12% per year, not per month. There's some internal contradiction within our letter that I'm going to bring to the attention of my team. And lastly, our standard billing practice is 30 days from receipt of invoice. It's been requested to stretch that to 45. Sure, that is absolutely fine with me. You know, in my 10 years at the firm, I've only had one issue with regard to a municipal client paying a bill, and that was a story that's too boring to tell tonight. So I'm not worried about it. 45 days is fine. Our first bill will come out after September, and then we'll go from there. Otherwise, I'm here for any questions. I'm probably going to stick around for a while too, just to get a feel for your meetings since I'm out here. But any questions you have for me, by all means, I'm game for them.
Thank you.
No questions?
All right.
I do.
It's
Great to be here. Great to
Did
be
we
here.
vote on that?
Yeah.
So we had a motion and a second. The clarification in the motion is going to have to be who you want to be the signature individual on the agreement. And that's only going to be for the agreement, and then going forward would be, or it's any correspondence with the attorney. I guess I'm unclear on that.
That's a good point, actually, to ask for a bookkeeping question. So we are setting up right now a general file, but I like to keep my files a little bit segregated depending on maybe business unit or type of work. So like, for example, I was corresponding with police chief for traffic court. That's going to be a separate file. If there's labor and employment issues, so on and so forth. I don't need to send, oh, we have a question on the Zoom.
Oh, it's delayed.
President Zimmerman
So,
and Council
I
President.
just want to make sure that's August of 2023, correct?
There's no option.
Can you hear us, Janita? Apparently?
Yep.
It looks like it's froze.
That's why. Sure, she can be on speakerphone. Foster.
I think we're there now.
Oh, there she is.
somehow.
I'm here.
No, you're on speakerphone.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that clarified August of 2023, right? Because it was cutting out a little bit.
He has not even said yes.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
The issue was I like to set up files for different topics and that way you can, trace it and whatever. We don't need to send a retainer agreement for every single file that we open. Some clients do prefer that. But we can just open up files as we go and as we need. But I'm game for whatever the council's preference is for whether you want a specific engagement letter on each. Terms will be the exact same. My rates across the board, my partners' rates are across the board. So up to you.
My recommendation would be for the city administrator, because he's gonna be having that daily contact with the chief and anyone else who would be corresponding with you. So, that would be my recommendation. At least for the accounting purposes moving forward, whether it's to sign this agreement, it makes no difference to me.
How do you have it set up with other cities?
It kind of goes both ways. Sometimes we set up the first one and then from there we build them out. Other times we'll have a specific engagement letter per file. When we do that though, usually the council will delegate the authority to sign subsequent retainer letters to an individual, be it the mayor or the city administrator, particularly when there's no changes to the pure terms. So one thing you could do is if we want to have an engagement letter, you could delegate that authority to Heath. And assuming there's no changes, if there were changes, they'd have to be brought to you. But that's one way we efficiently tackle it.
What do you think, Heath? So it's set up, I'd sign the original document and then going forward, you can be delegated as the,
It's fine with me. It's good. Council's okay with that.
if you want to include that in your amended motion to specify.
Yeah, I make a motion then that we retain the services of Davis Kilthop with Mr. Stefik being our primary contact. And that the mayor would be the initial signatory with the subsequent years agreements be signed by the city administrator.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
James Brewster absent. Wendy Shelton. Aye. Janita Zimmerman.
She's
Thumbs
still
up or
speaker.
down? Janita?
Aye.
There's a delay.
Oh, that's why.
Is she still on speaker?
No, but she can.
Can you see my thumb?
Robin Nelson. Aye. Richard Taylor.
Aye.
Eric Woznicki.
I said aye.
Yep, she said aye.
We'll
Sorry.
put you on speakerphone probably for.
Kathy
each
Brown.
vote.
Aye.
Or just keep her on mute right now. Just stay on the line.
John
Jimmy.
Blaha absent. I did not.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 7B, appoint Davis and Kilthau as city attorney. So they've been contracted and now with myself making that appointment, do we have a motion to approve that appointment?
I will approve that appointment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry, Wendy.
So, I'm not sure if this is the time, would it be, because right now it's a 2-year term, and would we change that at a later date, would you think?
Yeah, our current code right now says you're on a specific term, whereas everybody else is indefinite. So if we're
My answer to that is I serve at the pleasure of the city.
Okay,
and the
so,
council.
and what I would like is to, if I can go ahead, to have you be the appointed officer of the city. You're the city attorney. You're not staff, you're contracted by the council, and you serve at the pleasure of the council.
Not by me.
Okay,
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Janita? Is she off mute?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you, Janita. Thank you. Okay, item 8, new business. 8A, consider an act on a side agreement with the Wisconsin Professional Police Association regarding revised wage tables in the 2022 to 2025 contract with the Kewaunee Police Department.
Yeah, this actually started with my immediate predecessor, the interim administrator. They had a police patrol officer who was supposed to go up a step, and then they figured out, they realized that there was an error in the rates table starting for 2023, which of course cascades forward after that. So what you have in your packet is the same adjusted tables from Tom Schrank, who actually is in the audience, from the Wisconsin Professional Police Association. It's what you basically agreed to with the contract. It's just that there was an error and there was a calculation error in the table. And so the table that's attached represents the correction starting in 2023 and moving forward. If you need to speak to him more directly, he's available to take questions if you want to know what exactly happened. But essentially this started with staff finding the error, and then Tom confirmed it and then made adjustments in the rates table so to reflect what should have happened rather than what happened.
So actually what was agreed and what was approved was correct. It's just these inaccurate tables need to get corrected for the record.
Yes,
And
this is meant to reflect what was actually approved in the agreement, but screwed up in the translation in the tables
You
themselves.
just needed a motion to approve the correction
Yeah,
of the tables.
yeah. This is basically like a creation of a site. It's a formalized, it's technically it's a site agreement, but that's basically what you're doing is you're just making a correction to a previously approved contract to reflect that
I'll
change.
make a motion to- I'll second that.
any further discussion? Please call the roll.
James Brewster absent. Wendy Shelton.
Aye.
Janita Zimmerman.
Aye.
Janita? Janita?
Robin Nelson.
Could you mute her?
Richard Taylor.
Aye.
Eric Woznicki.
Aye.
Kathy Brown.
Aye.
John Blah absent.
Let's just wait for Janita here.
Janita, are you there?
Technologies.
She's getting that.
I don't know how long our delay is. I didn't think our delay was ever that long.
Janita, are you there?
He's still talking.
Oh, really? That's a long delay. You're still talking.
Oh, my.
Wow.
I'm an I.
Motion carried. Thank you.
I'm an aye.
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay. 8B, review and consider the proposed charter for the Public Property Committee. So we have a charter ordinance included in our packet. Heath, you want to put some words around? You got your recommendation included in the packet as well.
I don't have a specific recommendation, I mean, other than approval. You've had the comment, you've had the committee charter with you. I know the committee reviewed it, didn't seem to have any problem with it. Yeah, unless somebody can find or feels like there might be a potential conflict with another established committee, you can just go ahead and approve.
Yeah, based on the discussion I had with the mayor, I left in red under committee structure in the first paragraph that it would be ratified by the common council for a period of X. I put X in red, X years, unknown what we wanted to do. The mayor said it would just be an annual. So we could just do 1 year then, if that's what the mayor would prefer.
I think like anything else, it can be reviewed at any time. I don't think there has to be a term assigned to it. I mean, we can review any policy or procedure at any time that the council feels fit.
So we just strike the portion that says and ratified by common council for a period of X years, or just strike that portion that says for a period of X years?
And what do we add and can be reviewed at any time?
Why? Well, I don't know. I mean, we don't have a written policy that we can review anything at any time. That's just the way it is. I mean, we have, you guys as a council have that authority to review and revise. I would just strike out for a period of X years. Tony, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't see the document, but I mean.
Yeah, I haven't seen the document, but you have the
That
power to
sounds
reconsider
reasonable.
anything at any time.
I would make a motion to approve this and just remove for a period of X years.
I'll second it.
All right, Janita.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would like to add is just to clarify, I mean, for the most part, you know, I talked with Heath about this as well. It's, you're mostly talking, you know, like brick and mortar and real estate, right? I mean, we're not looking at, I mean, the literally is the staplers and everything in the city of Kewaunee. But it's physical
Items that were
structure.
titled or that have a certificate of manufacturer's origin,
Yeah.
like a trailer,
Yeah,
which was a issue of some
right. And I mean, some of
importance to some
of even
people
that sort of
recently.
thing, I mean, you know, you've got the individual that would be oversight directly on that would be our, Nate would be doing that, so.
Right.
All right, so that's really all I had. Does anybody else have any discussion regarding that? Points of interest?
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Right.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Tina. Motion carried. Item 8C, consider an act on a resolution honoring retiring League of Wisconsin Municipalities officials. So this was presented to us through the League of Municipalities, the 50 years collectively that these individuals have served all our communities in the state of Wisconsin. And the resolution before you is indicating that recognition that City of Kewaunee is supportive of that. And that's why I had to put on the agenda. So I don't know if you had anything else on that, Heath, that you'd experienced with it, but
No, although maybe some of the council members might. I'm looking at you.
Okay, so my problem with this is that when we were having a lot of problems last year, I wrote no less than 4 times to the League of Municipalities asking for help. I did not even get a return email, no response, not anything. So when I see this,
was it these individuals?
one of them was,
Interesting.
I did write to one of them and I ended up talking to the head of the League of Municipalities and he was quite surprised that I did not get a response. But the head, I will say that, you know, he talked to me and the other gal did send me information on finance committee, so I did get.
we were pleading for help.
All right, so we've got the resolution. Do I have a motion to approve? Is there a motion to approve? Then it dies. All right, then we'll move on to 8D. Consider an act on a resolution reaffirming the city's support of fair housing.
Okay, this is a follow-up to something that got passed over last meeting. I don't know if it was formally tabled or if we just moved on. This is a result, we got clarification from staff over at Cedar that this was a requirement as part of a CDBG grant, although there's some strangeness about this too. That apparently there's a self-monitoring checklist. This is basically just without going into the details of what you already have in front of you. This is basically a box checking maneuver. Somebody requires this as part of the CDBG process. And so, okay, so you check a box, you sign a resolution, you send it over there and that solves the problem. It's a little unclear, however, because later on in the package, then there's this thing where they say, okay, we're in compliance. So, okay, so we're either in compliance or not. So it's not entirely clear to me why this is. It's not going to really be offensive to anybody if you adopt a thing on fair housing, because I think it's like a kumbaya thing. You know, nobody's against fair housing. So approving a resolution that says that, just so you can meet a box check that somebody said we're missing, probably won't miss anything, although it's a little
But it
weird that
says-
we're getting this other thing that says that we're in
It says,
compliance.
yeah, on August 29th, 2022, the city received desk monitoring approval letter stating, this is from Lynn McIntyre, Planning and Grants Team Lead, stating that they were in compliance as the finding was addressed and is now considered resolved. And in the reading material you'll find here, it says, if you don't comply, you're not gonna, no further funds would be dispersed. And at the beginning of this memorandum, it says disbursement request number 3 was, and this is again, September 7th, 2022. Disbursement request number 3 was submitted to Department of Administration on August 12th in the amount of $70,559.85. Funds were received by the city on August 30th, 2022. I'm confused. Are we in compliance or are we not?
Yeah, that seems a little unclear to me because we're either in compliance or we're not. One person says we're not, and the other one says apparently that we are because we're still getting paid.
What harm does this resolution cause?
Probably nothing.
Irritation.
Yeah. Other than annoyance.
You're dealing with the government.
So,
So the import of this is that we, in all likelihood, would not suffer any loss of funding. That's the condition of this for the CDBG grant. This relates to Fisherman's Point,
Mhm.
not the Marquette School District
No.
property, right? Not the historic district.
Right.
We're not likely to build any type of housing on Fisherman's Point within 5 years.
Right.
So that would not require us to pay back any money if we did something different
Right.
within 5 years. This is probably moot.
It probably is.
and the keyword there is probably.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's probably moot and I mean, if it means that monies would be withheld and the fact that it's moot, yeah, check the box.
So,
I mean, originally I was against this when this was brought up the first time because we were told this was Marquette School.
I believe we did that for Marquette School.
we did it,
And
yeah.
so
Yeah,
this
so there was
an
was
ordinance.
over.
Yeah, so we don't have
So,
to do that again.
Right.
exactly.
So I agree with you, Rich. It doesn't, it's like if we vote, if we need to vote on this resolution, it doesn't really matter one way or another, but I find it
Well, it matters if
irritating.
we don't get any money.
I know, but I find it very irritating that there's this confusion. So,
Do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move to approve the
I'll second
resolution.
it.
Any further discussion?
If I may.
Sure.
I know I'm new here. You're not the first governing body that's had confusion about the requirements associated with receiving some money. And it's irritating because, yeah, we're being told we're in compliance, but we still have to do this thing. My recommendation would be, because it is pretty much moot, check that box, because by not doing it, you potentially face a second irritant of them, like 3 years later, you getting some ridiculous audit and they're like, where's your resolution saying we believe in fair housing? Which seems unnecessary, but so I would recommend just check the box, get it done, put it in the file, never look at it again.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. BE, considering a marketing program for the Hamachek Clocker property, parcel number 31241GL171-16. Cedar Corporation presentation. Come on up, Jim.
Hello, everybody. If I could I just address real quickly E, F, G, H, and I, just in terms of an intro, an overview. So on E, the marketing program, that's a follow-up effort to the RFP project that we had a while back to help promote the Hamachek site. So there was a conversation as to how do we continue on that marketing efforts. The first effort we did, put together an RFP for the community and get that onto some selected websites. Limited success, or not much at all, one applicant. So that's what that's about. And I'll ask Kelly O'Connell to come up and join me. She's our in-house communication specialist. She's got background in social media. She's got background in website design. She's got background in graphics. She used to work for PMI, so she was used to dealing with high-profile people like Cher and all those folks coming into town. But she's been very helpful to us. And I think she could be helpful to the community if you're interested. Also, she teaches social media consulting or social media over at NWTC. So as soon as we get to that one back, I'll ask Kelly to come up. The second one is the replacement of the Tug Ludington. We'll have Brandon cover that, and then also Nick Stefani might be on Zoom. He's got a link to that. He's with Edgewater. And then after that, we would have the Harbor Workshop charrette. Eric Fall will actually give you a presentation, a PowerPoint of kind of what happened or of the program itself, the event, and some of the updates. And that will lead right into a new marina design update from Greg at Edgewater.
Jim, I'd like you to forward any of your detailed information and handouts to the city administrator, the mayor, and myself as chair of the Public Property Committee.
Sure.
And possibly give the Public Property Committee a more detailed briefing such that we can feel like we can look over the issue in a little more detail and make recommendation to the council, the mayor, and the administrator.
Just a question, should this be going through property committee first before it comes here? Or?
It will be, Jim, or
It will,
Eric, but I
he's
wanted
here
the
now.
scale
So yeah, what you do.
of everything that he's got to be presented to the council to hear this because of the scale of everything that we have, and it'll get referred back to public property.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned, I talked to the mayor about this earlier.
Go ahead, Jim.
And then the last one, and I'll be glad to do that. The last one is on Fisherman's Point. There's been some question for some time about where we're at on that. And this, we'll try to put some of those answers to us tonight. So, and Brandon will give that update. We have Joe Pingle and Dan O'Connell on Zoom. They're the technical experts on that project. And they'll be available if there's some questions for those folks. So with that, Kelly, do you want to join me? So as Kelly's coming up, there's some preliminary information we sent over to the city that made the packets. And also in terms of reading what Keith's summary was, Kelly and I looked at that earlier today and thought there might be some way of just looking at what Keith had talked about and trying to address some of those issues as short-term available options or longer-term available options. Right?
Right.
You want to take it from here?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'll be right here.
Hello, everyone. So a few things we came up with were, first of all, taking the PDF of the RFP and converting it into a digital format so it can be hosted on the website and also in PDF, so those who want to print it can print it. And then on social media, Facebook and then LinkedIn preferably, if the city of Kewaunee has a LinkedIn site that is used. I would suggest using the two of them and creating a video or two of the redevelopment of this plat or things that are going on in the community, things that are new or have been redeveloped already, and displaying those on social media, and then either linking them from social media to the website or just hosting the RFP on social media itself. So without even having traffic go to the website, I always suggest having traffic go to your website just so they can cross-expose to other things going on with the city. Instead of video, we could also do graphics, engaging graphics and images of the city. A call for developers, something that's eye-catching, that gets people engaged and people wanting to click. We can also use hashtags. We can come up with a hashtag that we want to use, or we can use current ones, or we can do both of other hashtags that are being used in the community to cross-link. So you're exposing this property to other things that are going on in the community. So other people that are engaging with current hashtags will be able to see that this call for developers as well. We would be able to track these hits to the website and on social media. So it's kind of nice to be able to track, because then you know, are videos getting more engagement or are images getting more engagement? And if the videos are getting more hits, then hey, instead of moving forward the next couple of weeks with images, then we'll just post another video if this is what people want. And then we can always do, those are all organic initiatives to get traffic and exposure, but we can also go for paid campaigns on social media. So we can create an ad, target buzzwords, target a certain demographic and geographic of people, and this ad is served up to this certain group of people. But you know, we'd have to calculate a budget and how much we want, you know, to put into that, but that is always an option as well. Yeah, yeah.
Just one thing, we had a conversation with the mayor and the administrator about this earlier, about a couple weeks ago on it. And going back to that project that we had to promote the Hamachek site, the thought might be, if you're interested in trying to do it this way, take some of this type of effort, add it to that project. That original work scope was pretty much write the RFP and get it posted onto a number of websites. There's budget left in that project if you want. We could try to take some of Kelly's time once we define it a little bit better and put it towards that.
So Kelly, I'm talking with Jim. I expressed that I think we have to have ways to be outside of our demographic here, right? I mean, I think that this property, as unique as it is, there could be somebody on the East Coast and not Wisconsin East Coast,
Yeah.
the East Coast that is like, hey, that's a great property, you know, I'll hire local contractors and this and that, but I want to develop that property. I've got an eye for it and whatever. So if we can use some of these organic things, like you said, maybe a couple paid campaigns, we can reach anywhere
Absolutely.
with that media.
Mhm. Yep.
So.
And another option would be like using any community ambassadors or anybody that we can have reshare our posts to their network as well. And then it just starts spreading like wildfire out to the East Coast, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing most people are somewhat familiar with social media, and some are really good with it, some are not so good with it. I don't know, but that's my hunch. So I think it would be important if you were interested in this. We would probably need to get some direction from the city as to.
And yeah, and that'll get deferred over to public property, but
public property.
at least everyone's hearing this. There's a lot of information we're gonna try to get through tonight, not too deep into everything, but at least if everybody's heard it once, next time you hear it, it'll be a little bit more familiar for you that way, so.
So and with that, I think if you're interested, we certainly have the resources to help you. Your other option could be to go to a PR firm, but that I think is a little bit more expensive. And also we do have some room in our existing budget to try to help in that manner, so. And I'd be
We'll bring
very
that budget to the public property committee so we know what we've got.
confident- And I'm very confident in Kelly. She's helped us tremendously over the last year and a half or so.
Thanks.
It's exciting.
So,
Thank you, John.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
like Randy,
Is the microphone on?
No, it's
Oh.
the green one up there.
Yeah, you really have to speak up because I,
Okay, so yeah, I'm kind of going through the TUG project. I think everybody to some extent is familiar with it, so I'm just gonna kind of hit the high points, and then again, we can have Nick, who is on Zoom, maybe walk through it more if there's more technical or in-depth questions kind of related to where we're at with things. So just to put some parameters around the grant itself. The grant funds for the project were $249,040 with a city match of $62,260. So that comes to a total project budget of $311,300. We've been working with Edgewater Resources, kind of just investigating, gathering as much information on existing conditions, plans and stuff from when the seawall project was done. Nate's been helping us get plans and information from previous projects to try and look at soil sampling that was done in the area and different things like that, just to be able to consider, all information that is known when looking at design for this. So we have gone through multiple options and looked at a bunch of different things and kind of come up with what we believe are the two best scenarios for this. And one of them would be replacing the pilings in kind, essentially. So the two difference, I guess, between the options is one of them, you're driving the pilings just to the bedrock, and the other option would be to drill into the bedrock, I believe 8 feet, putting a rock socket in. The grant itself, the funds would probably only most likely cover replacing in kind, not with a rock socket. And that's where I think part of the conversation is, what's the city's long-term plan and goals with the tug? Is this something that you want here for, 50 years, or is it something that 10, 15 years down the road, we're gonna have to look at doing maintenance, rehabbing the hull on it or different things, like that. So I see. Yeah.
Brian, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm having kind of an issue here because I want to know, has the tug committee been on these conversations? Because my understanding was the plan was to replace the 2 pilings, and that was what the original grant was written for.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden it's like there's 4 other options, and so that's why I'm really confused.
Yeah, we did have a meeting once we kind of came up with different scenarios, and both of these options with the rock socket are putting 2 new pilings in.
Right.
One is just kind of a, I guess, more beefed up model, if you want to put it that
Right.
way. But we did meet with Nate, Heath, and Paul Jerdal from the tug committee as well to kind of go through this stuff. So we've been
Okay.
communicating with I guess, Paul on this project as well.
Okay.
So Brandon, what is actually failing on the current pilings?
This is maybe where Nick, I don't know if you're able to talk, where you want to kind of chime in on some of this stuff, if you can unmute him. Nick's the engineer from Edgewater that's been doing the plans and kind of reviewing the project overall.
Before. Your other screen, go large. There, no.
It's on his side.
Can't hear you, Nick. Delay is terrible. I don't know why.
Is this better?
There we go.
Okay, you can hear me? Okay.
No.
Paul Jerdal from the tug committee as well to kind of go through this stuff. So we've been
Okay.
communicating with, I guess, Paul on this project as well.
So Brandon, what is actually failing on the current pilings?
This is maybe where Nick, I don't know if you're able to talk,
Yeah.
or you want.
We don't want that on.
Let's put them on can we put them on a cell phone?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I don't have his number, Jim, if you want to go that route.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're gonna just try through a cell phone, Nick.
Okay, I tried calling through the cell phone connection as well, and nothing got through.
We got you on the speakerphone. I think
Okay,
if you speak loud, I think we can go with it.
the issue with the current. Is this okay?
Can you guys hear?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
The issue with the current 2 mooring bollards is that they're starting to get to the end of their design life. That's the first issue. The second issue is that when they were originally installed, they weren't really designed for this particular vessel. It was designed for more of a not as tall a vessel that's shorter, it's more for a barge. As far as we understand, they were installed to move and offload parts for the nuclear power plants. So the issue now is that those wood timbers are starting to deteriorate. If you look at the steel cabling that's bundling all those wood cabling, it's sagging, meaning that it's not connected and there's no structural connection between the wood timbers and the king pile, is what we call that steel pile in the center. We also have been told from Paul Joe that that timber pile is starting to flex more than what is comfortable. And we've been told, at least from one person, that king pile has been pulled up vertically a couple inches or up to a foot. And if it's been pulled up vertically, then that's a more unstable situation that we would not, it's not a very good long-term condition. So there's really two options involved. If we were designing this from scratch, we would basically need to drive the pile deep enough to where it's permanently fixed. Right now, there's only about 8 feet of really solid, strong soils that can resist that, and there's not enough given the loads of that vessel under what we would call 50-year storm events. So if we were looking for a true design life of 50 years, as if we're going to install this properly, we would excavate a hole in the rock, drill it, put the steel pile in there, concrete it so that it's nice and solid. We don't know if the existing piles right now have that feature or not. We suspect that it does because there's concrete, you can see concrete at the top, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be there. So that option is, the problem with that option is that it's going to come with a more expensive construction cost because the original grant was based on a construction quote that did not include that rock socket. And that rock socket's going to cost, we are guessing, and with preliminary talks to contractors, an additional $60,000 to $100,000.
How much do you think?
Which is a lot.
60 to 100,000.
The other option that we have proposed is that we could drive the pile to bedrock, which is what is currently being quoted, that was quoted by Rowan Salvage for that grant, but that we would expect a design life of those piles to be on the order of maybe 10 to 15 to 20 years. That would be the rough capacity of it. So those are the two options that we've designed and kind of worked with based upon our experience and sort of the constraints of the project. So.
I would like to say that we did approve the original grant and we approved the matching funds initially. And 15 to 20 years, I think that's what we need because the tug is going to have to be pulled out and dry docked. And we're going to have to do some other plan with it. So 60 years, I think, is way over what we need to do, and we don't have the finances for it. Jim Schaller is here from the tug committee too, so I don't know if he would have any input either, but.
Just some of the questions I had.
Yeah, okay, good. I just think it's important that we kind of already did approve the.
If you get anything warranted for 50 to 60 years, the guy that's gonna pay you back on that warranty isn't gonna probably be around, so.
Exactly. Well, is the tug committee gonna be around, Jim? Are you gonna be-
Just saying.
I'm.
Well, those were put in, what, in early 90s maybe?
Those were put in for the tug.
Right.
Well, I thought they were put in for the turbine transplant for the power plant. But
But I don't,
those on. Anyway, what, they've been there, is it 30 years?
they've been there as long as we're gonna need them to be there again.
Right.
Well, that was kind of a lot of our thought too, was what is the long-term plan? You know, really, if you can figure you get 15 to 20 years utilizing the grant funds, that's a pretty good opportunity to buy you guys some time to kind of think about it too, but wanted to just present multiple options at least if.
Other questions had come up, right? It's like, can you have tiebacks, bollards on land and this and that, tie it up to the seawall? That's what other communities have done with their tugs. And it was clearly described that that would not work with the seawall that we have.
Yep.
Nick's got a question. You got him on phone yet?
I was just gonna add that a lot of that detail is discussed in the memo.
Yeah.
So feel free to review that and take your time to make a decision or talk about options. You don't need an answer today necessarily. It's just, there's more detail in that memo outlining other options that we're looked into.
Right.
And it's important for the council to know those things because all of a sudden you're gonna get asked on the street, you know, well, did you look at doing this? No, we just went with this. you know, what options are there? And we,
See, my thing was, the recommendation was made by the tug committee. They wrote the grant, and I assume that they, you know, and looking at it now, we've already approved that direction. That was what my understanding was.
We have.
We just wanted,
Yeah.
staff we just wanted to make you apprised and our conversations with Nick and their staff, we wanted to apprise council of, here's the other alternatives. Do you think you want to do something other than what the original grant objective was? Because if there was, now is the time to talk about it. But if you're not really interested, then we can go ahead and assume that we're just trying to replace the two with two new ones as it was originally designed, and then we'll just go from there. But that's, I mean, if that's what your decision is already, then.
I'm comfortable with what we've already authorized.
Okay.
All right, anybody else?
if there's no further questions or anything, then appreciate the presentation, Brandon and Nick. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now it's on to the charrettes.
I'm Eric Powell, Senior Planner with Cedar Corporation. I'm gonna rely on Greg Wycamp here from Edgewater to get the presentation.
Make us
up and
talk to the
running.
screens, hopefully.
I think so.
We did it before. I'm trying to remember how we did it. Yeah.
Did you do it
we have an
wirelessly? I don't
HDMI?
remember.
I don't think we did it wirelessly. I think we might have connected
Do
it.
that because
She's got it.
We can try it wirelessly. Do you have one of those devices? We can.
I think we did use that actually.
Is that okay, or is it, will that mess everything up?
Do you use that right now?
Well, this is what puts it on the TV screen so people can see.
So that recording then for YouTube, what's on the screen right now is what's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, that would be okay if it's gonna be his presentation.
Let's save this to there and put it on your computer, then we can show it from here. That will work just fine.
Yeah, because then you're just gonna share your screen to whatever you do. Share her screen.
I don't know, like,
We'll be okay.
that's fine. I have instructions on how to put this up here. That's it.
Let's try that.
Bring them with you. Yes, I thought you might.
Sure. We should be just okay with that date.
Okay.
Presuming it's that.
Yeah, a 50-50 chance to put in the right way, and 90% of the time
And
it's
you get it
upside
wrong every
down.
time.
There's nothing over here.
There we go.
That's true.
Our guys want to sign off.
No,
They come back
no,
on.
no, this will run December while that continues to go.
Originally does this joint?
All good. All right, I'll drive while you sign in. It's gonna make it sign in. Okay, I'm gonna make a PDF of it real quick while he starts, and then we'll just have a PDF.
Sorry.
Once you start chatting, and I'll get this done real quick.
Sure. I'll get a few things started here while he does that, and the imagery doesn't matter that much, but I think as you're aware, Cedar Corporation partnered with Edgewater Resources and worked closely with the Lakeshore Natural Resource Partnership, as well as one of their contractors, Water 365, to apply for a grant from the Fund for Lake Michigan to look at doing a project which essentially is focused on implementation of the Harbor Master Plan, but the realization that things may need to be adjusted in there in order to align the city and the projects with potential funding sources coming up. So a $40,000 grant was received. Really, the focus is coastal resiliency and taking a look at the projects that were listed, not only in the Harbor Master Plan, but also all the other plans that affect the community in an attempt to reevaluate some of those projects, some of those sites with respect to sustainability, resiliency, looking at what could be done or done differently with the plans that were already in place. And we're not judging the past plans. They were done, not too long ago, 3-4 years ago. But times have changed, really. The conversations have changed with respect to coastal communities. So this, I think, was a good effort to kind of ease into that conversation about coastal resiliency and the investments that the city may make in the future and how you can get the most bang for your buck and longevity with respect to that. Let's see if this is working.
There it is. Commercial break.
Very good. All right.
All right. So as noted here, we built off existing plans. We're not creating a new plan. We're really focused on implementation and using that resilience and sustainability as lenses. Go ahead, next one. I think one of the most obvious reasons why you've experienced it, your boat launch was closed for 2 years. You had a lot of flooding issues, ice damage, other things related to the natural environment and being in a coastal environment. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep throwing money at something that's going to continue not to function because of some of those types of impacts. Next one. So the overall project goals were in place in the grant, really to put the city in a better position to garner community and political buy-in. We know that historically, maybe not everyone's been on board with the ideas and some of the projects. So this is an opportunity to kind of rekindle those conversations, hopefully get better alignment between the council, committees, the general public, anyone involved. Obviously, looking at projects and practices that improve water quality to keep the Great Lake great, if you will. Ensure more resilient harbor and waterfront areas, look at opportunities for shoreline habitats and improvements in habitat, and ultimately realizing an increase in eco-friendly tourism types of activities and any resulting economic development. Next. So we came up with a fairly simplistic process. We started off in May doing an inventory, looking at all the reports, all of the projects that were listed, all the different sites. We assessed them. We took a look at each of those. We looked at the conditions of those sites and the facilities on those sites. The design and the prioritization is really part of the charrette process, which I'll get into here shortly. And then we're in the process of trying to finalize some of the work for the final report with opinions of probable cost, feasibility, funding opportunities, what it may match up with in terms of grant opportunities, and we'll serve that up to you in one complete report. All the information I'm showing you today will be included in the report, but I'm happy to provide the presentation afterwards. So overall, based on that inventory, looking at all those documents, even beyond the Harbor Master Plan, there were 16 sites of interest that were noted. Not every one of these sites had a concept plan prepared because of the nature of some of the sites. I mean, the lighthouse, it's important, but what are you going to do different out there? The lighthouse will stay. There was a notion of looking at acquisition of the marina and to the north, and that is really more of a decision by the council than anything. So nothing was prepared for that. But we did prepare 8 concept plans for those 16 sites. We inventoried all the plans. We prepared fact sheets for each of those sites, as well as a condition assessment report for each of those sites. Next. What I think was really valuable and a benefit, or at least I hope the participants did, is through the design charrette process, we took a bus tour. We went out and looked at a majority of those sites, got on the ground, made sure we all understood what we were looking at, looking for opportunities, and there were tons of conversations during that process, which I think were very helpful to us as the consultants, and I think hopefully for the community. The 2-day workshop, we ended up having about 35 people for the first day, and then about 20 the next day. But overall, for this size of community, that's really an excellent turnout in a wide variety of stakeholders that provided really good feedback, some positive, some negative, but that's the way things go. And we appreciate their time very much. So some of the outcomes of that charrette quickly, we came to the realization pretty quickly that there are numerous sites that are not terribly well connected. And these are all sites of great importance or potential importance in terms of functioning for tourism, for recreation, and those types of things. And so we did a quick sketch looking at opportunities to better connect some of these sites and maybe where some new connections ought to occur. And we'll elaborate on that in the report as well and some of the other items. Maybe one thing to note of interest, or a couple of things of interest that came out of the charrette, was the idea of a chain ferry, a way to connect the Fisherman's Point area back to the southern shore. There's examples of that out in the country where it's basically a self-operated ferry that you pull this chain and drags you across. Also looked at the undesirable state of the bridge in terms of being pedestrian friendly and bike friendly, and actually proposing that perhaps a second pedestrian bridge that's separated but adjacent to the Highway 42 bridge might be of something that would be of interest. Next slide. From there, we took a look at each of the sites here and the ideas that were generated, reviewed those with the folks in the room at the charrette, and generally had concurrence on these types of things. I'm not going to go into detail on each one, but highlight a couple of items on each one. Selner and Pioneer Park, obviously trying to continue to look at connecting those areas with some land acquisition. On the green end, or the resiliency end, looking at the removal of turf grass and replacement with prairie plantings, certainly benefits for water quality, for habitat. Looking at adding some ADA accessible parking at the top of the hill at Selner Park. It's a long shot and a very costly item, but concerns about algae collection as well as protection of some of the berms to the north that have been built up to fend off the high waters, that some type of structure may be required. But again, that gets very costly, and a big decision would need to be made on that. Next. Some of the sites really don't have a lot of space or a lot of things to work with. Lighthouse Park in the city-owned green space, obviously there's been some things done there recently. Biggest issue there is connectivity with the respect to a trail, the water trail, maybe some vegetative plantings for decreasing wind and sand erosion. Sand piles up in quite a few areas in that area. Maybe opportunities to also capture some stormwater and some bioswales and things of that nature. Next. This is a city-owned green space, really a very underutilized area, and just one concept, obviously, but perhaps could get more attention by putting something there, such as a sculpture garden or sculpture park, which has been very successful in many communities, be visible from the river, visible by traffic going along Highway 42, might give a reason to stop. The addition of some stormwater facilities, better connections, a short bridge to cover some gaps, and get a path along the southern frontage of the harbor. And as I mentioned, the pedestrian bridge adjacent to Highway 42. Next. City campground. This one has a lot going on, but obviously just trying to look at improvements, not only in the RV area, which is simply a huge patch of gravel at this point, but also expansion and looking at some tent camping sites to the north of that. Looking at a new community, I shouldn't say community center, but a gathering center, a shower facility, something that could also be used as an emergency shelter in stormy weather. A variety of additions on here to make that just a little more attractive and also available to different types of camping users, making sure there's connections to the Marshland Walk and things of that nature. Next. The combined disposal facility, a lot of conversation on this one, and we're not saying that this is ultimately the recommendation, but with the amount of space that exists out there, there seems to be some level of interest that perhaps the solar project could fit on there and still allow for additional uses, including a trail, a dog park facility, and those types of things. There are obviously questions about the soils and the capabilities, ability to hold those kinds of structures. But kind of thinking big picture, it might be neat to have a solar powered marina next door. The one thing that we still don't have in hand to really get better guidance on this is the agreement between the city and the Army Corps of Engineers, which is going to dictate to some degree what can be done out in that property. So again, this is a charrette, this is visioning, it's an idea, but it's not committing the city to anything. And then the lovely hand-drawn sketch, Greg has much better artistic talents than me. But the three sites, the Fisherman's Point, the Marina, and the River Landing, there were a few variations, but these were sort of the selected ones. Looking at Fisherman's Point as primarily a mixed-use development, combination of some new development, some open space, softening of shorelines. The Marina, I'll let Greg talk more at length to that specifically. And River Landing is really a redo of a similar concept, but it's actually creating an island and dredging and digging some of that out so you get better water flow, better habitat opportunities. Just makes for a neat environment, I think, as well. But essentially having passive sports and boating on the west side of the bridge and the east side of the bridge, more active types of boating. Not that the two can't mix, but that's some of the ideas that went behind these concepts. I'm gonna turn it over to Greg then, because he's gonna go into more detail specifically about the marina, and then we'll close things.
Just scroll down.
Yeah, that's all. It's just scrolling with the center wheel there.
She's got it.
She can scroll.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm Greg Wykamp with Edgewater Resources, and we focus specifically on the marina design here. What you're seeing here is sort of a refinement of the plan that you just saw before. We took a look at advancing the design in a little bit greater detail to address a couple of things. Obviously, the current docks are kind of at the end of their useful life. We've got some ice damage issues that we'll talk about in just a minute. And then we're looking at here is how this all integrates into these broader plans. But this was to specifically take the marina design a little bit farther. So what you're seeing here is we've actually pushed the existing edge of the marina back into the site for a couple of reasons. One is to get more slips. But two, one of the problems that we have on the marina site is it's very low and it floods. And so this actually creates a source of fill to raise up the site and solve some of those drainage issues. It also allows us to have a better protected area for the docks. And we also pull some docks along the edge of Fisherman's Point there, along that edge. And so we currently have about 100 slips. This is about 130 slips. So it does allow for expansion. There's a question.
What is the material of those docks that go kind of along the bridge?
Yep. Those docks, we'd propose these would all be floating docks. So
Floating
a
docks.
floating dock system. Yeah.
So how would that help as the river comes through in the winter?
Sure.
Like how is
So-
that going to protect?
We'll come back to the ice issues later. We believe after having spent conversations with Augie about what's driving the ice issues, it's actually a slide we'll get into later, but I can just hit it right now. Primarily what we think is happening is there's multiple different problems from ice. There's ice shove, which is blocks of ice moving down the river. There's a lot of conversation that was the primary issue, and we don't think that's actually the case after having more conversations. What we think is happening is when that whole thing locks in as a sheet of ice and then the current from the river comes by, that it's actually pulling a sheet of ice and it's pulling the whole dock system away from the shore. And so that what our current anchorage system is what we call a telescoping spud pile, which works great in a relatively protected environment, but it doesn't have a lot of resistance to horizontal movements and forces like that. The last one is actually what we talked about a little bit with the tug, which is ice jacking, when it grabs a hold of those piles and lifts them and wiggles them up out of the base. So all of these would be designed, we would recommend using, instead of telescoping spud piles, driven guide piles, which would just be a heavier, more robust system. And then a combination of that with more ice attenuation, which is basically bubblers or de-icing units that minimize the ability for that ice sheet to form and grab hold of everything and create that force. So this would be designed very much to be a complete replacement of every part and piece of the marina as it exists today. So when you see the price, it'll be a little eye-popping because it's a complete reconstruction of everything: new buildings, new parking, completely regrading everything, solving all of the problems that you've ever had with this marina forever. Now, we probably can't afford to do all of that at once. So what we're going to show you is that's the whole big picture. And then we're going to show you, what do you do for an immediate phase one that's actually the most affordable, and what's the path to get from A to B while we look longer term at these other issues. So you can see here, we have new parking up above, we have a new building. And then we have, as I talked about, connecting paths, and then also grading, solving the flooding issues in the low flat areas where ponds and everything. So if we go to the next slide, So this is the terrifying side. We'll just dive right into this. So if you don't worry, I start with the bad news and then I go to the good news. There's the path.
Garage right next door if anybody has.
So keep in mind, this is a complete reconstruction, taking everything away, excavating a very large amount of materials to create a larger basin, regrading the entire site, new pavement, new walls, new everything, new buildings, and it's about $8 million. It's a little bit more than that. We can go into that in a ton of detail, but let's actually just jump to what I'm going to recommend as the first phase, because you're not going to do all that. What you're going to do, if we jump to the next slide, what we would recommend you start with is don't do any of that upland stuff right now. The key issue right now is the docks, not the upland infrastructure. We wanted to look at that as part of the long-term infrastructure. But if you basically, instead of actually, you can see where we've excavated out that triangle, ghosted underneath. If we basically keep the shoreline exactly as it is and build in a new dock system, this gives us about 103 slips with Augie. I think that's about 3 more than you have now.
Yeah.
And you could pull those slips along the edge there to pick up some more if you wanted. What this basically says is leave all the existing shoreline infrastructure in place, put in new docks to replace the floating docks that have had so much trouble. And the nice thing with the floating dock systems is in the future, if you expand and keep building it out, you can just add on. And we've done that in plenty of places before in phases. You could also start this project. We did a project in Harrisville, Michigan, where we would have gone through and replaced one segment of docks every year for 5 years or 4 years. So you don't have to take the whole entire marina. You can say, we're going to start with A dock, and then we're going to do B dock, and then we're going to do C dock, and so forth. So what this does is this would give you the same number of slips. If you go to the next page, this is a much more palatable number, still a scary number, but a possible number. So a couple of things on here. This is a little over $3 million, $3.3 million to start over with completely new docks, completely new gangways, completely new utility systems. So some of the issues you have in the current marina, obviously you've got the issues with the ice attenuation. The docks are failing from age. Plus we have electric shock issues and ground fault protection issues that we need to bring everything up to code. So this would give you a completely new marina that is going to last you for the next 30 to 35 years, fully up to code compliance, fully ready for all the future things that are coming. We are going to start to see electrification in boating. I know that seems crazy to think about, but in the lifespan of this marina, I promise you, you will start to see boats that have full electric propulsion and no engines. So this would bring up all of those things possible. I've actually been pretty conservative with these numbers in terms of like the square foot price for the docks. We have it at 95. I can actually get that for around 80 to 85, but I thought let's just not, go there. We also have a 20% design and engineering contingency here because we haven't really dove in. So what we would do next in this process is start to dive in and really kind of pick that apart and try to bring that total construction cost down. And if we go to the next slide, we can talk about what kind of revenues are we generating. So this is a little bit, let me try to explain this. What I was trying to do here with this chart is looking at your current rates. So what you're seeing on the left side and the top there are the lengths of the slips. And so a 25-foot slip right now goes at about $49.16 a foot, and that gives you the price that you're paying currently. So I just use the current rates. And so as a marina operator, what you want to understand is what are my revenues, what are my expenses, what's left over, and what can I use to service debt to help fund this. So this just basically outlines what the current rates are, and I'm using the current rates from this summer that I just received this week. I'm showing an occupancy, a seasonal occupancy about 95% and a transient occupancy of about 50% and operational expenses of around 35%. So if we go to the next slide, what that turns into is what kind of revenues would we generate with this marina? Now I've actually increased the slip sizes a little bit. Now, we originally had talked about going to larger slips, significantly larger slips in that plan. I actually went a more modest increase. So I went a mix of 30s, 35s, 40s, 45s, and some 50s, as opposed to jumping up to the 50s and 60s. I used your exact current rates. And if there's boaters in the room, and I am one, I am going to recommend you do need to look at those rates, particularly if you rebuild this entire marina and it's brand new and you're starting over. That is the time to correct the rates for the regional market. We just completed a market analysis up on Green Bay, and I recognize it's not exactly the same, but we're seeing rates. These are all averaging around 66, 65 a linear foot. We're typically used to seeing 70 to 80 for a market like this, even as high as 80, 90, 100. We don't need to go that high, but I think we'd need to be looking at that increase to bring it up. But what this works out here is it shows a net revenue of about $145,000 in this model. If we go to the next slide, If you use that at the very top there, if you use that money to fund a revenue bond, and this is how we built like the 31st Street Harbor in Chicago, for example, which if you want to, that was only $103 million. So that's fun. But so the point is that revenue could fund about $2.1 million of net revenue bond using that income at 3% for 20 years. I don't know exactly what your terms are here, but something along those lines. And that shows you that we have a deficit of about $1.2 million. And so how do we make up that deficit? We can make up that deficit with a boating infrastructure grant. A boating infrastructure grant helps fund transient infrastructure. You can get a grant up to $1.5 million. You can actually start by getting a grant for $200,000 to do the engineering and planning. And that's actually, and it's a relatively easy grant to get. We've got that for our work up in Green Bay. And then that's tier 1. And then tier 2 is this one up to $1.5 million. We got 3 of those grants this past year for $4.5 million, about $4 million total. We've gotten 18 boating infrastructure grants. We're 18 for 18 over the last 15 years in getting these grants. This is where I say past performance is not a guarantee of whatever, but you get the idea. That's a very good grant program. We may not get $1.5 million. We might say, well, maybe it's only 300,000 because of how many transients we want to have versus seasonals, because that funds the transient piece. There's also Clean Vessel Act, which will pay for pump outs. There's Wisconsin Waterways grants up to 250,000, coastal grants. So my point is yeah, we have a deficit. So what we want to do is work on both sides. I want to push the construction costs down by being smart and doing value engineering with Augie and his team. And then I want to focus on the grants and meet in the middle. I'm quite confident that we can get there. So that is the very quick overview of the marina design. There's a lot to think through. But the focus right now is one step at a time, build it in phases, do what you have to do. You don't have to bite off the entire thing at once. We regularly phase projects. The next slide is the ice one, but I think we've already covered that pretty well. We would also, so we would recommend for this winter, getting 8 to 10 de-icing units. They're about $1,000 a piece, so it's not inexpensive, and they take energy to run, but they will limit the ability of that sheet of ice to form, and it will allow it to break up and should reduce those forces. It would also be nice if we could fund it is a little supplemental, a driven anchor pile or possibly cable anchoring if there was something to shore that we could count on. I don't know if we want to use any of the shoreline walls. I haven't looked at it that close. But a combination, at minimum, the de-icing units, and then supplemental anchorage if we can, should keep that from sliding too much. So
You're speaking of for this year?
For this winter, correct.
Well, we have de-icers now and the water's getting so low that the de-icers are bringing up mud already.
Sure.
So we would have to dredge for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we push them farther out, and then we could also mount them differently. Do you hang them off the ropes right now?
Well, off the docks.
Okay, because the other thing we can do is we can mount them on rods and turn it horizontal versus going further down. So there's other ways to do it.
Right.
But the point is I'm trying to get you through this winter, and without spending a ton of money, that's probably the cheapest, fastest way to do it. And we can dig into that in greater detail. So if you go to the next slide, it's going to be back to Eric. Are there any questions on the marina before we do that?
So Greg, just to be clear, so we're trying to get through at a minimum of 2 years with our existing.
Yep.
Because we discussed with, I think it was you guys saying that if we were to go with brand new slips, we would not even be able to get them until 2024.
Yeah, if you ordered them right now and put all your money down today and you had all the money, you would not see that stock show up until July of next year. And so you're not going to get a marina next year, no matter what you do.
Right.
So what we would recommend is pushing into this next grant cycle and looking at a 2024 timeframe. So
I would ask that both you and Eric submit the information that you have, whether it's a slide presentation. And then come make a presentation to the Public Property Committee at a later date. I'll get with the mayor and the administrator to let you know when it's going to be. I've got some ideas about, when I want to have a meeting. Actually, I'd like to have one on Thursday, but I don't know if Mr. Brewster will be back from Germany by then. So I'd like everyone to be present, at least at our first meeting. So we'll work through that and we'll contact you about that.
What other mitigation do we have to do then? Because we've got some electrical things. We're not going to put in all new pedestals. We're not going to do all of that, but some of that stuff, has that been inspected that we know what must be done?
We have not done a full electrical inspection. What we typically do for that is we bring in a specialist. There's a gentleman we work with named Gary Loftus. He's the best in the country, but he's also very practical. And typically you've seen Gary's presentations. He's phenomenal. But the problem was all ground fault protection is a pain in the butt. because it trips, and then you've got boaters complaining that your marina's terrible.
And it fails.
And then Augie has to go, the problem is actually your boat. And telling a boater there's a problem with their boat is like saying, you know, your baby's ugly. They do not want to hear it. They want Augie's baby to be ugly, not their boat. So there are things that can be done there. You can do a marina guard on the whole system, and it will basically mean that your system never runs because it shuts everything down. We've worked with departments of natural resources where they've built in the systems. And the problem is it's the cumulative losses. It's not the individual loss, it's cumulative losses of the whole facility. And that's why we try not to use those. What we could do is we could replace and put ground fault protection breakers at each pedestal. It doesn't meet the full code, but it's better than having nothing. So that is another layer to this we could look at. But you really, the challenge is you really don't want to make any major investments in your electrical system. Honestly, the most important thing you can do right now is put a sign on every pedestal, no swimming, stay out of the water. If you keep people out of the water, you've solved the problem. And we did a facility assessment for all 87 state-funded marinas in the state of Michigan, and they obviously cannot afford to redo. You basically need to rewire the entire system. So when you build your new marina, you'll have fully code compliant. There's no way that the state of Michigan is going to take 20 years to do that. So in the meantime, you keep people, you do not let anybody swim in your marina.
You never let somebody swim in the marina. I mean, there's straight voltage off boats anyway, so, yeah.
I want my kids swim in the marina I built. So.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. And then just to wrap things up here, you're gonna see the same kind of level of information that Greg just discussed on all these other sites and projects, just so you're aware, but he had stuff completed to the degree what he wanted to share it tonight. Just quickly, another thing we did in the charrette, and I talked about using sustainability as sort of a lens to look through, and we usually like the words people, planet, profit, and looking at how we can address all of those things and a number of sub areas or criteria that are tied into those three bubbles: public access, community heritage, tourism, resilience. These are all things that I think people in communities want, you know, and how can we ensure that some of those pieces and components are elevated in any of these projects. So we went through a bit of a quick prioritization, and nobody's seen this yet, so you're the first. But the results are just a snapshot, just gives you a sense. It's not terribly scientific, but if you go to the next slide, we developed a matrix using those criteria and having discussion with the folks in the room at the time about which components, you know, and pieces fit those different elements, and then just kind of a quick rough score 1 through 5. The end results were the top ranked site, and there's not a lot of difference in points, is the Fisherman's Point site. Came out on top as number 1. The River Landing site on the west side of the bridge, the passive area, came out at number 2, and then the marina came in at 3. Thank goodness, because if it was 6 or 7, then Greg did a lot of work for us. But you can also see, you know, the next highest ranked 4 and 5, really the parks on the south end along the lake shore, because those do get quite a bit of use. So this is to be a guide for the council. It's not the end all be all, but I think it kind of captures the pulse of where people are putting priorities, and you can all argue all the details of those and where you want to move things up. But I think there's some logic to it. You've got 3 very big riverfront properties that could have a very huge impact with improvements, and those came out on top. And then the other parks and facilities came out a little lower. But nonetheless, I think in this community, it seems like everybody values every piece that's out there. So so this was kind of interesting to go through. Next slide. Just kind of a reminder on the outcomes expected from doing this plan amendment is to really align the city, better targeting of appropriate funding devices and sources. I think you're all aware that there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars that will be coming into the Great Lakes and across the country for climate change issues and other things. So you need to be prepared, and having this level of information is going to be able to let you write a grant and show the funder that you've really thought through this, that you've added these lenses of sustainability and resiliency, and should make you more competitive. We talked about the project criteria, connectivity, obviously looking at positive water quality impacts, nature-based solutions, and the like, and ultimately the end result is increased tourism, increased economic development, and a growing, stable, and beautiful community along the waterfront, which is, I think, what everybody wants. So with that, I will end it. If there's any questions for me, happy to try and answer them.
Just got one. You mentioned the marsh walk. Do we know anything about the, that there was a grant for that? Do we know? We didn't get that one.
I think that project wasn't quite aligned with what the funders were looking for, if I remember, but we'll find some other opportunities. Other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll make sure we share all this information.
Okay. Then we'll move on to item 8J, consider an act on a counter offer to propose purchase offer for west half of 302 Hathaway Drive, parcel number.
You still haven't done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
More for you.
I thought it was our last one.
We're on 8I. Yeah.
All right, then we got Fisherman's Point. Hi, Brandon.
Hello again, everybody. Before I kind of get started on this one, I know we're kind of just trying to give a broad overview of all of this stuff. I do have a spreadsheet that kind of goes over all the grant criteria and our estimated construction costs and everything built in, so you can kind of see our best anticipated numbers. So I'm just going to kind of hand these out real quick before walking through everything. I'll just hand two and go down. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of just go through what was included in the packet real quick, just as kind of general basis and discussion, and then kind of go through how that applies to the numbers on the spreadsheet that I just gave you. So for an update related to the environmental stuff that we're working on with the project, we have Dan O'Connell and the environmental team had completed doing the analytics and the data collection on the soil impact areas that were kind of deemed hazardous. That's on the northeast kind of corner of the property. It's more right along kind of the shoreline or the water edge, which actually fits into the scheme of kind of capping and raising the site well. So capping could be a good option for that one. We've also done, they completed the methane gas samples. And what they had found is that Vapor Point 3 is right off the northeast corner of the slab that's still there from the building that got torn down. And we kind of suspect that that concrete slab is acting almost as a cap or a barrier itself, that there's probably some organic soils or different things that are underneath that slab that are decomposing and releasing gas basically through Vapor Point 3 where we're doing our testing for that. So those are kind of the environmental the pieces of it. So with those studies kind of being done right now, we'll be submitting the site investigative report to the DNR, which basically tells them what we found and kind of what we're recommending or suggesting to do for the environmental remediation related with the contaminated soils and the methane gas for those. So that's kind of a quick update on the environmental piece of it. More related on engineering or site design. We completed the flood study for Fisherman's Point, which basically is determining the effect on the floodplain by raising the elevation 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain. So also while looking at the flood study, a big piece of that was the wave run-up analysis as well. So based on those numbers, a plan was created to kind of complete Fisherman's Point. And I included in the packet too, there were a couple of attachments. The first one was just kind of the environmental sheet. This one to kind of show where different sampling and stuff was to help kind of identify the locations for those. And then also out of the plans, and these are again, just kind of draft plans as we're working through the environmental stuff with the DNR, you know, certain things might change to some extent. So kind of this sheet that you can show here, more is identifying things that need to be removed still, hazardous materials that were around the shoreline and different things like that. Joe Pingle, he's the engineer that's been working on this piece of it. And him and I always kind of joke around that, you know, it's great that we raise the center of it, but we're not letting our kids play around that shoreline because it's pretty hazardous. So we want to make sure that within the grant, we get all of that kind of taken care of and addressed as well. So then kind of referring to this sheet here, we're referring to that one as the shoreline stabilization. That kind of plays into the charrette session to some extent. So in the middle, you can see is kind of the high point, which is raised the 2 feet above the floodplain elevation. And then the kind of hashed area, the orangish one is gonna actually be like a geotextile grid. It's kind of a grid pattern material. Think of a bunch of like egg cartons stacked all next to each other. It's made for this more than you fill those with stone to help restore the shoreline in those areas. The stuff with the blue hash marks there is where there's gonna be larger, bigger riprap. And kind of the intent with all of that is to allow natural vegetation to grow over those shoreline areas kind of over time, which again fits with kind of what the theme with the charrette session was, to have more of that active natural shoreline. It's more likely, you know, for it helps with wave run up to help calm, where if you have a hard surface with inside the harbor, your waves are bouncing around and different things like that. So it's kind of more aesthetically pleasing, but also has benefit too with inside of the harbor. Okay, and then also looking at the flood study was kind of created or looked at once this plan was done then as well. And the flood study was actually able to determine, or Joe was, that raising the 2 feet and kind of going with the conceptual designer layout on the plans at this point will not increase the 100-year flood elevation. I know Joe's online. If he wants to kind of, we want to let Joe talk at all a little bit, just to kind of give a little bit more technical background, if Joe has anything to add to that, I guess.
On your phone.
Yeah. Number. Help calm, or if you have a hard surface with inside the harbor, your waves are bouncing around.
It's crazy. Well, that was.
You never wait too, man. You heard us talking about him. You would think you could wait it over. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Oh, hang on, we got you on, oh, you're on speaker. You call.
Okay.
Hang on. Talk loud.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
So the flood study,
He's got to turn his speaker off on his computer.
Joe, do you have your speaker on your computer still?
it says it's muted. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in the other room.
Okay.
Yes.
So I did a flood study based on the plan that was submitted. And there's an analysis that needs to be done, and we have to demonstrate that the 100-year flood elevation is not increased at all. And so based on the calculations that were done, FEMA is in the process of updating the floodplain calculations for the Kewaunee River. So our analysis uses this preliminary study that they put together. And so we were able to demonstrate that the work that's going to be done at Fisherman's Point will not increase the flood elevation at all. That was submitted to the DNR, where they reviewed our method and how we did the study, and they concurred with the results of the analysis. This is standard operating procedure typically to verify that, you know, we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
You don't have any?
So,
go ahead, Joe.
So the property, Fisherman's Point, is still in the 100-year floodplain. So the next 2 steps that would be involved would be to submit a CLOMAR, which stands for Conditional Letter of Map Revision. So now that we've gone through the state agency, we would need to move on to the federal, which would be FEMA. And the CLOMAR is basically asking FEMA permission. Do you concur with the results of our study? That's kind of a little bit of a technicality. It doesn't need to be done. After the site would be filled, that's when you submit a letter of map revision. And they would review things, and that's when the property would be remapped. At this point, I've had some conversations with the DNR, and it's basically the city's option to remove the Fisherman's Point from the floodplain. For the CDBG grant, the Fisherman's Point has to stay as a green space for the next 5 years. So we can remove it from the floodplain, but it's not a requirement. If a developer were to come in, or if the city were to develop it and we need to remove portions from the floodplain, it would be done according to that plan and not necessarily the one that we just did. So in essence, the procedure to remove the property from the floodplain, we'd have to do it over.
So what he's kind of looking at, I guess, to summarize on that one again is, we can do it, now as part of the project once it's done, which might be able to help with a marketability or sales standpoint. If you're looking at getting proposed developments and hey, it's out of the floodplain, you don't have to worry about it again. But then on the other side of it, if there's a developer that's going to change the layout of the site, it might have to be done again. But kind of the thought behind that, I guess, too, is that if the developer is submitting a plan that's gonna, require an additional revision of the map, then you can put that on the developer, then the city's not on the hook on it. But we wanted to just kind of talk overall about this, that there's just a couple of options in some of the conversations, I guess, that Joe had with the DNR discussing what the approach is to get that out of the floodplain.
The good thing is if they do it now, it's clear for 5 years.
Yep. The site.
Diploma, yeah. If you do it now, then they're clear for 5 years. They won't have to worry about it until maybe somebody.
You can build on it anyway.
Yeah, you can't build on it now anyhow, but I think it makes it, more marketable from a kind of a sales standpoint type thing. But again, that was one that we just wanted to weigh out all the options and everything, of course, just to present you guys with all the facts. And if you want us to go ahead and do that, I mean, that's part of the work that we were planning on doing.
I think not having it in the floodplain would open up many more options. Makes sense to do that.
So there's a couple of things that we have to meet. We have to meet the CDBG timeline. We're looking at raising the site.
Yep.
And wherever we'd be raising the site, that's going to be affecting the floodway map. And then when does that CDBG timeline 5 years clock start?
The clock on that starts when the project is completed. So when the grant is
Everything we
actually
just
closed
talked about
out.
needs to be completed first.
Yep.
And then our 5 year time clock starts. So if we get all of this done, we lay out the site that we feel is the most desirable to build and still have water access, I would say we fill it and get everything done now.
I just have a question. Okay, so we can take it out of the floodplain, but what about the floodway? Isn't that?
We're essentially talking the same thing. The elevations down there are all between the water high line and the lake is what, a foot different?
Yeah, somewhere around
Roughly
there.
586, or I don't remember what it was, but
But does that affect a different thing? Doesn't the floodway?
to my knowledge, no. I mean, Joe can speak up.
Here, we'll ask Joe. He's kind of our expert on this one. They're kind of asking, I don't know if you heard the question, how removing that out of the floodplain relates to the floodway that's associated with it as well.
Basically, the analysis that we did demonstrated that the portion of Fisherman's Point that we're raising is not in the floodway. So the floodway is the portion of the river that water is actively flowing. Meaning if you block that, it's going to increase the flood elevation. Flood fringe is like a backwater area. Because of how high the water gets, water can backflow into the area, but it's not really flowing. And so if you fill it, it doesn't really impact the 100-year flood elevation. So
yeah,
the portion that we're raising is considered flood fringe. And by raising it, we're not impacting the flood elevation at all. And that's where we submitted our study findings to the DNR, and they concurred with them.
Yeah, everything from the DNR, well, FEMA sounded positive in the city's best interest. It sounded like everything was gonna go well for the city. So I think having a little more background for the council is great. And again, we'll be deferring this to public property, so.
Okay. And then there's also a couple of other items too that are kind of included on the memo that are listed under the additional work section for those. So those are kind of items that we had identified that are going to be needed to physically complete the project itself. So for the environmental, they're going to have to submit a remedial action plan. That's pretty much a plan explaining what action is going to be taken for during construction for construction purposes to deal with the environmental. But after the construction phase as well, that ends up being kind of your closing document explaining what all was done. So it's a document that gets submitted to the DNR that ends up explaining kind of what the closure was on the site and how we dealt with all the environmental issues with that. Just a smaller bullet point was review soil sample analytics. Those were soil samples that were taken by staff and submitted to a lab, but we had to go through and comb through all the testing to make sure that the ground from the sites that was tested is acceptable for Fisherman's Point. So the property on Ellis Street, with the CDBG grant, most of the focus is on Fisherman's Point, but there's also the 2 residential properties as well. So the fill from the house on Ellis Street will be okay to put on Fisherman's Point, and the stuff from the proposed business park also. I mean, there's plenty of fill up there to raise that amount. I mean, you can fill that thing 2 feet 50 times if you really needed to. So there's plenty of ground up there. So those are 2 additional items for environmental work. As far as more on the engineering or site design goes, we had to map the bulkhead line. That was kind of a requirement to see where the bulkhead line shakes out. And Joanne was a huge help with that. She found that ordinance for us. I don't know how or where you track that one down, but she found the legal description for it. So we were able to take that legal description and plot it and get it on the plans and everything, which was fantastic to be able to figure that out, how it associates with not only this project, but just the whole bulkhead line and the whole Winter Harbor and everything. That's really important information. So that was awesome for you to find that one. Then also we're going to have to include the 2 residential properties to that plan set as well. All of this stuff is going to have to be publicly bid. So you're going to want to do that all at one time. So we're going to have to add plan sheets for the residential properties for those as well. So the one on Kilbourne Street is more straightforward. It's going to be kind of a final grade to it, see the property. There's a few sidewalk cakes and stuff like that that are broken that, you could probably get adjusted or addressed, with the project. I think there's a stump there that even could be ripped out if somebody's there with an excavator, that sort of thing. And then with the property again on Ellis Street, there's that retaining wall that's right along Ellis Street there. That's going to have to be removed. All that ground's going to have to be taken out. There's a holding tank on that property as well too that's going to have to be abandoned and taken care of as well. And then part of the CDBG requirement is to have biddable plans and specs. We're going to have to write a spec book that kind of lists through the actual, how contractor gets paid for this. It's listing out the work, essentially, the quantities on ground that we're going to be taking, how they're going to get paid for removing the debris that's around the point, how they're going to get, how you work through just any item really that's involved with the construction aspect of things. The construction observation is another thing that's going to be needed. You have to have somebody there on site actually measuring and calculating quantities that a contractor that, if they put in a payment application or request, you want to make sure that what they're requesting payment for is the actual work that they did, not that it's just a number that was submitted or different things like that. It's also a requirement for CDBG. They have federal wage requirements for that. So you have to do interviews with the people that are working on the job to make sure that they're getting paid the federal wage rates for those things as well. So with that one, it's kind of
It's not Bacon Davis, it's something different. It's federal.
Same thing. It's the Davis-Bacon kind of wage rates. Yeah. So, and then again, with the number with that, we put 25,000. That's kind of the best estimate. That's kind of an hourly expense. If somebody's there half the time, it might not cost 25. It could be less. It could be a little bit more. It depends on the rate of construction with a project like this. We had the chapter 30 permit listed as well. It doesn't sound like we're going to need that from talking with the DNR or Joe talking to the DNR, but we want to leave that on there just so there's not surprise $10,000 permit that has to be done at the end, just to kind of look at the big picture of things. So those are items that are gonna need to be done to get, I guess, a biddable set of plans and specs put together so we can get this thing completed or more towards the construction phase. These were not items, I guess, that were really included in the original scope of work. I believe the intent was probably that staff was gonna be doing a lot of this stuff. And I don't know if that's really the case at all anymore or not, but these were kind of numbers that we put on this for us to be able to help out with those services. So that's kind of the memo, I guess, explaining everything. And then this sheet here really is the total budget breakdown that shows everything. So on the left-hand column is what was the total grant award was. So you can see, and it was broken up between 4 pools with the grant. It was acquisition, site clearance and demolition, environmental remediation, and grant administration. What we did was add in the remaining services or work that's gonna need to be done, which are the items that are off of this memo that I just walked through, just to be able to give you the big picture budget for everything. Then also we put the chapter 30 permit on there if needed. So the next column over is the city match. There was a match requirement of 15,000 for the grant administration. The column next to that with total requested to date, that is the amount of money that's been that CDBG has basically refunded the city for, that's gone through disbursement requests and everything. So those are the funds that have been used so far. The next column over, it says billed, not submitted. That is pretty self-explanatory. That's what's been billed to the city, but has not been submitted to CDBG. I believe it's $25,000 you have to get to before you can go through a disbursement request or apply for funds to be reimbursed for the project. So we're keeping track of that as well. The work in progress, unbilled, we put kind of estimated by that. We think those are our invoices that are going to be coming for engineering and environmental work, and also for Edgewater's efforts that they helped with the wave run up and some of the other analysis. So those are probably next invoicing period when things come around, bills that you'll probably be seeing from Cedar Corporation related to the project. So again, we're just trying to paint the big picture and put it all out, not miss anything on the funding for this. The transferred professional services, that is the items that relate to the memo, the project cost for stuff that was on the memo. And we use transfer professional services, I guess, for the term on that one, because we believe the intent was city staff was going to be doing those items. From what we can tell, that was kind of the intent, I guess, of the grant. Again, so those are ones that are going to need to be done. And if you want us to do that, we're more than happy to. The next line over is the projected construction number. So that's our opinion of probable cost for construction. That comes in at $693,781. Just one thing to really keep in mind is that's kind of the best guess estimate. Being a bit of a unique project, you never know how people are going to do stuff, when it comes to removing the debris. The trucking and hauling fill and material and things like that are pretty straightforward. We were able to look at, local bid tabs and what it costs for trucking fees and things like that. But the removal part is really a best guess. I just want to emphasize that one. So the big number really, when you look at the remaining balances at the bottom right, that with everything kind of out in front of us now, what we know and what we're projecting for the remainder of the project, it looks like you're just shy of $300,000 remaining in grant funds after everything's wrapped up and said and done.
I think you brought up a good point before, that we've got 3 properties on the CDBG and everything has been focused mostly on Fisherman's Point. And so they all need to be completed before the clock starts and the money runs out.
Yeah. And the deadline or the grant was supposed to be closed. When was that, Jim? Was that the end of October?
Yeah.
I believe it was the end of October. So what we're doing now is we're working on filing an extension with CDBG. Jim, you're folding it from somebody else.
How long, like, if we do all this stuff, how long is that gonna take?
What we're doing is looking at kind of a realistic time frame of total project completion, and we think it's pretty realistic that to be end of summer, real early fall next year. The kind of the goal or overall goal of everything would be able to get the plans and specs and everything ready to go, get this thing bid in winter, And then as soon as snow conditions allow, get a contractor out there and going as soon as they can. And then actually within our specs, we will put a project date. This project has to be done by then, just so we make sure that this thing gets done.
This is good. I
Thank
mean,
you.
this at least is reassuring a little bit.
What do you know about the extension?
I don't think it takes all that long. Do you know, Jim, once we actually file or submit for the extension? I know Lynn McIntyre and Renee Swenson are the two that are doing the grant admin. They've been kind of talking to the DOA about this, so they're fully anticipating it. They're expecting that it's going to happen. It's not a surprise. It sounds like there shouldn't be any issues or problem really with it at all. We've been communicating with them that it's coming, I guess, for quite a while now.
The important thing they told us was, our own people told us is you need to be very accurate when you're given that request. So some of the work that Brandon's done here is a reflection of that, so that we have a pretty good idea of what we're talking about in terms of, and Joe, in terms of what we're talking about, what's left and has to be done. What would have been done by the city, that now has to be done by somebody else, like ourselves, hopefully, but it's all there. So we have a lot of confidence in what we'll put into that letter.
Well, and that's why we're having this brought to the council, because I want everybody to understand, there's like, gee, Cedar Core is doing this, Cedar Core is doing that. And there's money coming from so many different sources, and to be able to understand it and track it, Joanne's got this stuff coming in, and obviously she needs to understand where it's getting assigned to. But we've got a lot going on, and it's just good that we can all kind of try to keep up with what's going on.
So in reading through all this stuff in the packet, it says from the Division of Energy, Housing and Community Resources, does Davis Bacon apply for the CBD grant? It says no. Why is that?
Is that from?
Oh, that's in the packet. That's what you guys sent over.
I'll have to follow up on that one. Let me make a note on that and make sure that I get you an answer.
There's been recent changes regarding wage rates, and so that might fall under the new category that where it's changed and no longer is required.
Can you? What page is it?
It's page 12. I don't. So it's, I mean, it's page 12. Yeah, so
We'll definitely get clarity on that.
Yeah, I'll make sure to follow up on that one.
Davis Bacon applying. No.
Did you have anything else to cover? Does anybody have any other questions?
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Brandon.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, the one other thing I had too, not related to this, was kind of writing, and this was a conversation between the mayor and Jim, was for us to kind of submit like a monthly report similar to what staff does. I have one typed up. I can kind of hand out to everybody, whenever you want, but I'll just kind of plan on doing a monthly update. I broke it out into 2 sections. The first one being kind of the advisory agreement. Just what all gets done through our yearly agreement, whether it's working with staff or looking at grants or funding or things like that. Then I had a second section that just lists out the specific projects that we're working on. It's not everything, it's just ones that within the last month that we made progress or worked on. So it's more of a bullet point list specific to each project, just hitting the highlights of everything that we're working on.
So on that, if you could include, if you want to get you or Jim sent to us sometime in the next week or so, the actual agreement, the scope of work, unless that's what you're referring to, because I know it's been handed out before, but I don't know if the current council has had it or seen it. So everybody understands what your normal scope of work is. And Jim, would you come up and explain to the council a conversation we had about your scope of work and your expectations, and the fact that you likely will be doing more work?
Sure.
Geez, I'll just kind of hand out while you're talking.
What the mayor's referring to is called the municipal services agreement that we have with the city. It's an agreement that provides the city with a group of services that we kind of estimate every half year. We've done it now we're in our second year, at the very end of our second year. It's a $25,000 agreement. We try to scope what you'll need every 6 months. There's a series of activities that provide ongoing routine assistance to the community as needed. we expect that we can go over that amount at no additional charge to the city. The return for that is our hope that the city would recognize us as their municipal engineer, and we would be used on your other projects. The additional amount that we go over is, well, I think the first year we went over by about 10,000 roughly. I've got the report somewhere. First half of last year, we went over slightly about 5 or so. I'd have to go back for the real numbers. But we're not afraid to go over. But as I said, the intention is that we are with you. You know, we're invested in you, and we're looking for some assist or some help backwards to be your engineer. So I know if I said it very well, but
You're on our team. That's why I'm giving the staff report.
yeah, awesome. So
Keep the numbers coming.
yeah, and what did I want to add to that?
We'll tell you it's pretty big.
Thank you.
Jim Bush, I don't know if I've seen that before.
Anything else?
That was what you
Anything else I
said,
gotta
you
add?
don't want to tell anybody you have an ugly baby.
No, really.
Right.
But I think too, once we kind of pass out or send everybody the scope again, if there's any questions or anything on it, we can go over that too, but it's something that we meet with administrative staff with Cody this year, going into this year, as to what items, we pretty much provide a big list of things they think that they're gonna need help with, whether it's providing cost estimates for a construction project, or looking at grants or economic development, or actually reviewing, developed plans that come in from developers or different things like that. So we kind of create that list with staff, and then really just throw our best guess at how much time and effort we think we're gonna spend on that sort of thing. So that's kind of the basis of where it comes from. But again, we want everybody involved and on the same page as to what those services, are that everybody's looking for.
I did recall what I was going to mention, and things have moved real fast. I think this is maybe what the mayor alluded to. In the past, we have this agreement in place, right? And FEMA came up, right? So Mr. Kabaki did his best to ask if we could include that in the agreement. I said, sure. But if it becomes a project of its own, I think it's really not the intent of that agreement. So ultimately that ended up being $6,000 or so thousands of dollars for our effort, probably close to 8 by the time we're done. We pulled that out of the agreement. We originally recorded it in the agreement. We pulled it out, and it became its own project by addendum. We did the same for when we wrote the grant for helped write the grant for the harbor amendment plan. That was about $3,500 that came out of that. Grant applications are not part of that, but our effort to try to find grants for you is in that. So grant applications can be a little bit of money or a lot of money. So. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anything else? That's enough of Cedar. We're done. Let's get out of here for tonight.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. All right, now we will move on to item 8J. Consider an act on a counter offer to propose purchase offer for west half of 302 Hathaway Drive, parcel number 31241 GL 17-1-13-1.1.
Okay, the package, I prepared a draft counteroffer to Yacht Haven Kewaunee, and also his attorney who drafted the original boilerplate. For what they're requesting to offer us to purchase the property, which is the west half of 302 Hathaway Drive. It's actually just a portion of that part of property. This is one of those properties that's split by Hathaway Drive, so it's technically one parcel, but it's, yeah. And you have the letter in front of you with the 5 conditions. Finance offered up at least 1 or 2 changes, one of them being to include a contingency in there that if the total costs of what we're doing exceeds $5,000, the city reserves the right to renegotiate purchase price. And also a change to the discussion about the drainage easement, so that the city is retaining a drainage easement, but the applicant or the purchaser is going to pay to make that easement happen, to essentially pay for the legal description of the easement and the conditions under which it would exist.
That would be recorded, would that have to be recorded? That would be
It would have to
recorded,
it would have
yes.
to be recorded as part of this purchase.
Correct.
We would have to make sure it's in place before the purchase actually gets transferred over. So that's the idea, is to essentially put them on the hook to do the easement. We'll do the part where we separate this property by legal description, but they have to do the easement and then the contingency on the price.
So based on everything that's in our counter offer, it'll get submitted to the prospective buyer, and then that will come back once he signs it to the council for final approval.
That's correct. I can do this I can add a signature line for Yontav and Kewaunee, care of Russell Forkert. And I can also add a signature line for his attorney, but I don't know that that's necessarily necessary. But I can just leave it up to them to decide what to do with it. Do you have any?
No, you don't have to have the attorney sign it.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right, so I'll just put a,
Yeah.
I'll put a signature line on there saying, if you agree with this, please sign it.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll move on.
So would we see the revised contract before you send it out? Would the council see the revised contract?
Well, I wait for the contingency to come back before I know what we're exactly looking at. I can send you the original draft of the purchase. It's basically a boilerplate document.
Sure. So just to catch me up, we're buying or we're selling?
Selling.
We are selling half of a property to a private buyer.
Yes.
Okay. Is it developed? Is it a vacant lot?
It's mostly underwater.
Is it a pond?
It's at the northeast corner of
Shoreline.
the shoreline area near Hathaway Drive.
Okay.
Most of it's submerged. There's about 11,000 square feet that's actually above ground. The purchaser is the property immediately adjacent to the west, the Salmon Harbor property.
Okay.
They're purchasing it primarily for the use of setback.
Got it. Okay.
So that's all they're buying. They're buying a property. We have some interest in it because of a drainage easement that runs through there that we need to maintain for previously approved, basically drainage down to the.
Got it. Okay.
Area.
All right. And so the first document, did we get from them or did we give to them?
He made an offer to purchase.
Yeah.
Oh, so a standard commercial or residential offer to purchase, one of those long boring documents?
Yeah,
Okay. And we're just tweaking that slightly.
yeah, we're responding to that in kind. Yeah.
We're responding to that in kind,
Counter
counter offering with some amended terms.
Yeah, slightly amended terms. He's offered a flat out price. We're suggesting, well, there's a few things we want to make sure that are clarified in the document as part of the purchase.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, just lay that all out in like a draft amendment and I can take a quick look. I won't spend much time on the standard document. I'll just make sure that what you're explaining matches what's on the amendment or whatever that document is. We should be good to go.
So I think what Wendy's asking is a timeline here, and are we gonna get eyes back on it? Or is it assumed that everything that's in here that's being proposed would be in the document and then the council would be satisfied with that?
I think what you're approving is you're approving our counter offer with the conditions we specified, that I'm authorized to sign it and send it out to him, requesting a signature on his part. And if he comes back with something else, that comes back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we really need then is a
Yes.
motion to accept, for the council to accept this counter offer to Forkert Yacht Works.
Yeah.
Kewaunee.
That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
With everybody understanding the process, that
Which
we're
will include
His review.
Make sure.
Okay, so I would make a motion that we approve the counter offer with our attorney Stefik to examine the document. And with the stated terms of the counter offer accepted by Mr. Forkert. It's done.
Yeah, I would recommend you formally reject the offer, right, that they made, because we're not accepting their offer straight up.
We kind of did that at the last council meeting.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you reject that and then authorize, to authorize staff to provide a counter offer that includes the terms discussed.
Gina just wanted to make sure that you knew that was the property that in question is less than half of the parcel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'll second the motion. What was the motion? The motion was to approve.
The counter offer with the attorney reviewing it, and we're also rejecting the original offer.
Right.
And that's with all the notations that are in our packet would be included in that counter offer.
Like the 80 different things that we're responsible for would be key.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Irrelevant, but relevant if we got stuck with it.
Yeah. Some stuff that's not essential.
Sure. I'll track it. And then if I have any questions, I'll make sure it's clear.
Yeah, no discussion. So,
Well, I want to, you need to hear the motion.
yeah. Did we have language in here that he's calling Janita.
Oh,
Did we have language in this? I don't see it. Let her know that we're gonna be making, we have a motion on the table to put forward our counter offer with the attorney reviewing our counter offer. And that'll be authorizing the administrator to sign it and give it to the purchaser, and we're gonna reject the original offer. And right now I'm asking Heath if the language is going to specify that the city will have to, whatever language, renegotiate or whatever, if any costs were to exceed $5,000. You would mention that, but I don't see it.
yes, it's not, well, it's not included in here. That was added at finance committee, but we're gonna add it into this language to include it as basically condition 6, which says basically there's a contingency that we are request,
Have the option.
the city reserves the right to renegotiate if the price, if the. total
So
cost
I'm
exceeds
requesting
$5,000.
Mr. Taylor to amend his option to include that language recorded in the minutes.
I will amend my motion to include
Item 6.
item 6,
Yes.
contingency that is in the minutes.
That will allow the city to renegotiate if any of our costs go over $5,000.
That's correct.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Janita, are you clear on anything? Do you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, please call the roll.
James Brewster is absent. Wendy Shelton. Aye. Janita Zimmerman.
Aye.
Robin Nelson.
Aye.
Richard Taylor.
Aye.
Eric Woznicki.
Aye.
Kathy Brown.
Aye.
John Blaha is absent.
Motion carried. All right. 8K, consider an act on a request to reallocate sewer utility funds from Hamachek Lift Station upgrade project to upgrade pumps at the Milwaukee Street Lift Station. Josh is here, so
I'll adjust it.
let him.
So I talked to the Public Works Committee on Thursday. We had budgeted to do the Hamachek lift station project this year, cost of $109,000. They're having a hard time getting electrical components, so that's been pushed back to delivery date of mid-December, so it's not gonna get done this year. We're in the process of budgeting for 2023. I would like to do pumps and VFD drives to upgrade them pumps at Milwaukee Street lift station across from Nulachek Service Center. We have a problem with rags. They're plugging them pumps up and we're constantly fighting that. So it's time to upgrade them pumps. So we're gonna budget for that for 2023, but I'm asking to avoid any price increases at the end of the year. If we could bump that up, use the funds, some of the funds from that Hamachek lift station project, use them funds now to do the Milwaukee Street this year. And we'd still put that money in the budget for next year to replenish to finish the Hamachek project.
Again, I think the price for the Milwaukee Street lift station work was $13,976. So we definitely have the money in the budget in order to cover that. That's not an issue.
And like we're talking, it's not gonna dabble into much of the allocated money for the Hamachek lift station, and just a little bit. But keep in mind, excuse me, We also got reimbursed for our efforts at Hathaway Lift Station, which will be in about the same tune of what this estimate is for. So there's gonna be money coming back into Josh's account on the back end that will not be going back to the budget line item that we expended it from. If we didn't have to expend it on that, there would have been extra monies left over to possibly do this work effort without having to dabble into the allocated money that you just.
Make a motion to approve this.
Let me,
I would second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, that's fine. Janita, we'll just see if she has any questions. Does anybody else have any questions regarding the motion on the floor?
Yep.
Janita, we have a motion to approve $13,976 for the acquisition of the pumps. Do you have any questions?
No, we discussed it and.
Public Works. Yeah.
And it's just basically reallocating the money for this year and then adding it next year.
Thank you.
All right, if there is no, do we need a roll call on that? So roll call, please.
James Brewster is absent. Wendy Shelton. Aye. Sorry, aye. Jenny Zimmerman.
Aye.
Robin Nelson.
Aye.
Richard Taylor.
Aye.
Eric Woznicki.
Aye.
Kathy Brown. Aye. John Blaha is absent.
Motion carried. Thanks, Josh. I, or L, wherever we are, L, financial reports, month ending July 2022.
I make a motion to approve the financial reports for July 2022.
I'll second that.
We'll find out if Janita has anything. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
Janita?
We have a motion to approve the financial reports for month ending July 2022. Nelson made the motion, Shelton seconded. Do you have any questions?
Nope.
Please call the roll.
Aye.
You have to call the roll for this?
Oh,
No.
okay.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
9, announcements. Ms. Nelson.
We have a group coming from Milwaukee to tour the lighthouse. That would be this coming next weekend. Plus, I just got a phone call from Jerry Sinkla and he would like a group to tour from UW, GB, it's the alumni. And so that's pretty exciting. Both groups are about 20, 25 people. So we've been talking about changing up our tours and like this, voila, it's happening and they're all paying. So.
Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I just like to announce that my intentions are to have the Public Property Committee meet on the 3rd Thursday of each month, which would be this Thursday. However, if Mr. Brewster isn't back from Germany, I may have to move that back until he is available. So just so you know, in October, my intention is to have the meeting on the 3rd Thursday of each month. I'll try to meet before that whenever Mr. Brewster comes back. I assume we'll be back before that. I want to get one in before the next council meeting. So that would
be
where I'm
6
going
p.m.?
with that. Yeah, 6 p.m.
Okay. Anyone else have any announcements? Ms. Shelton.
While we're talking about meeting times, the Finance Committee will be meeting on Tuesday, October 4th at 5 p.m.
All right, thank you. Nate.
So I just want to bring it to attention, it was brought up at the Public Works Committee, there's another grant for trees besides the forester grant I'll be closing out. It's gonna be an in-kind match, so essentially we'll be removing the ash tree and removing the stump, and it'll be in parklands, there's roughly 33 of them. In return, Stantec, Melissa is working with me, that she's in partnership with the NLRP. They're gonna be putting in a new tree for us and covering the cost of that and the planting, all we have to do is maintain it from there out. So these are ash trees that are already scheduled to be cut down with our forestry grant, so that makes sense. I just want to make everybody aware, since it's an in-kind match, we don't feel the need to get council approval, but I thought I should bring it up to surveys aware.
Appreciate that.
Just one more thing too.
Yep.
Vliet Street started. They started work on Vliet Street today. It's not going terrific, but.
We got one service completely full, but we're running into a pit run and large rock in that area, so it's kind of slowing down. But effort.
But it started.
I'm not hopeful once they move a little bit west, they won't have that resistance at their energy.
Any other announcements?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Is she a little under the weather? Is that why she's not here?
Yeah, she has.
She was sounding a little coffee.
Oh, yeah, she's a little caught. That's why Eric kept cutting her off.
Joanne,
And
you
a-
have a headache by now.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm in tune.
Well, it's fine. I can watch this again.
Yeah, I apologize again to everyone for this.
Oh, well.
You're all right, buddy.
Everyone deserves better than that.
Yeah.
I had a brain fart.
Yeah.
Yes, well, that happens.
Welcome to Kewaunee.
Thank you.